All right, I'm going to try and cover two chapters today. I'm going to be aggressive. Before I get into those chapters, though, I want to run back and emphasize a point in Daniel. Can you read that one real easy?
Although I heard, I did not understand. Then I say, My Lord, what shall be the end of these things? And he said, Go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end.
Better font than Dolphin?
Oh, yes.
I will probably come back a little bit and go into what's going on in these chapters, but the summary, Daniel has been shown a vision of things that's going to happen in the end, and it makes no sense to him. A lot of the book of Daniel he did not understand, and he's asking, what does this mean? Although I heard, I did not understand. And what he's told is these things are sealed. They're not going to make sense until the time that they're wrote for. They're all through the ages, people have tried to make sense out of these prophecies. Daniel, a lot of Jewish writing, they don't even want the layperson reading Daniel because it's some of the chapters are just out there. But as we get closer to those days, things start making sense. Like for the last 2,000 years, there's no temple, but there's references to some things that have to happen in a temple. Well, we're seeing them, the Jews back in their homeland, they're getting ready to build a temple. You know, in this case, it's talking about somebody who will come on the last days and it's referred to what we loosely call the Antichrist in the before this, and he lays out that a time period of 42 months, things are going to be real rough before the Ancient of Days comes and settles everything, and I'm paraphrasing a lot, but from where Daniel was standing in time, this stuff made no sense. He was shown these things, and is told to write them down, and that's the point I want to emphasize. The fact that some of this stuff that we're seeing is starting to make sense says we're getting close. But even as I'm going over this, some of this stuff I can't tell you like everybody in here, you've heard people try to pin the tail on the who the beast was. It was Ronald Reagan. His name was six letters, and six letters. It was Bill Clinton. It was, you put the person in the picture. They're trying to identify somebody in Revelation chapter 13 that it's still sealed. Does that make sense? This, so as we go further, there are things that I read and thought 10 and 15 years ago that I'm seeing a little different today. And it's not that I was wrong then, it's a deeper understanding. Go ahead.
After these things I looked, and behold, a door standing open in heaven. And the first voice which I heard was like a trumpet speaking with me, saying, Come up here, and I will show you things which must take place after this. Immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne sitting in the heaven, and one sat on the throne.
I touched on this verse a little bit last week in the direction of the rapture, but after these things, that is the Greek word like metatauta, and it means after this. This was the after. This is after the seven churches, and you notice verse 1 begins and ends with that phrase. Immediately, John is taken up in the Spirit. The voice he's describing is like a trumpet. That's the same voice he described in chapter 1. It's Jesus. he is hearing him as though a trumpet is blasting, or
Who sat there was like a jasper and a stone
mhm.
and appeared, and there was a rainbow around the throne and appeared like an emerald.
The word here that gets translated as rainbow might better be translated as halo. This is not a rainbow of seven. It's like a green circular uh, halo surrounding the person on the throne. He's describing the colors that are coming out. I say like you're shining a light through a ruby or something, and it will cast. He's trying to equate, in my opinion, some of the stuff he's looking at is beyond our dimensions, and he's trying to describe things that in our limited world we can't fully understand.
He's trying to explain it in a physical, but it's actually a spiritual.
Yeah, well, I should have. There is a picture that Sally made of Jesus on the cross, and I pull it up later if you remind me. But he's trying to depict a four-dimensional cross, and it's got extra. It's you're trying to draw something that's beyond what you can conceive. Um, Chuck Missler uses the example of a two-dimensional world, like I think he said Mr. and Mrs. Flat. It's two-dimensional. You can be right there next. They can't see you. They don't have this third dimension. If you stick your finger through their world, it's going to appear as a dot that grows into a hole. You know, you can fold them up, put them in your pocket, take them. You can be closer to them than they could ever be to each other. But the whole time, because this third, they can't see. How would you relate to them? We are, in my example or his example, Mr. and Mrs. Flat. God is beyond our dimension. Does that make sense? And John is trying to describe heaven, what he's seeing. He's seeing a being in the center that's coming out with radiant light and surrounded by a greenish rainbow halo glow.
To make the breastplate of judgment artistically woven according to the workmanship of the ephod. You should make it. It shall be doubled into a square, a span shall be its length, and a span shall be its width. You shall put 4 rows of stones. The first row shall be sardis, a topaz, and an emerald. The second row is a turquoise, a sapphire, and a diamond. The third row is a, where's that word? Jasmine, and an agate, and an amethyst. And the fourth row, go ahead and read that.
A beryl, an onyx, and a jasper.
To a Jewish mind, saying that the light is like a sardis stone and a jasper, they would immediately think of this representation of the breastplate that the priest wears in the temple. This is out of Exodus 28. The first stone represents Reuben, the firstborn. Reuben's name, behold, a son. The last stone is the Jardis. It's the stone representing Benjamin, and it means the son of my right hand. having the first and the last, it's like a representation of the Jewish Messiah. To a Jewish mind, when they hear these stones, they're immediately going to think of this plate. Now, if you want to go down a rabbit hole, go look up and try to figure out what these stones really are. Because these are ancient names for these stones. They've been translated through several languages. And you get into the Temple Institute, they're trying to recreate this stuff, and you will read pages on arguments. What is a jasper? What is a sardis? What is this diamond? Because this diamond may not be what we call a diamond today. Some things say that a jasper stone is actually a diamond. Sardis, I touched on that in the church. They're not sure they know it was a reddish stone. They don't know if it was a ruby. So I kind of got lost in that for about an hour or so yesterday, reading opinions. And you go bounce through different translations. There will be different names for these stones based on what the translator thinks the modern stone would be.
Basically, there's just a stone that correlates with each of the 12 tribes.
Yes. And they had a color to them, but okay, is what they called a diamond 2,000 years ago what we called a quartz? They both would be clear.
Guess that's when them things are going on when we get on the other side.
Exactly. But
Never heard of.
and like I said, these are ancient names, and they can't run over and pick up the old priest's breastplate and look at them and see what they were. So, but they're trying to recreate this stuff. So they get together and argue these little things like what the size of the thread should be, and what is the exact color of this, and what is a true jasper, what is a true sardis stone.
24 thrones, and on the throne I saw 24 elders sitting, clothed in white robes, and they had crowns of gold on their heads.
And my point in that previous slide is just pointing out, if to the John hearing that stone and that stone, that represents the 12 tribes. It's like the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, represents all, or in this case, these 24 elders. Now, who are they? First off, I'll say if you're reading the King James, the word thrones was translated as seats, but the Greek word is thronos. It would be better translated as thrones. This is New King James I'm putting up there. The number 24 involving a group is only found in 1 Chronicles 24, 1 through 19. In the Chronicles 23 and 1 Chronicles 24, David he's been told he can't build the temple. But he's up in years and he's prepaying the cost, and he's also preparing everything so that when he dies, Solomon can build the temple. He's getting all the blocks stacked. He also, by this time, the chapter records that the number of people available for priest is over 38,000. And there are Levitical rules about, the family of Aaron does this job and the other Levites do that. And he's sitting here, we got too many people for the job. So he divides them up into 24 courses. And each course would serve from like a Sabbath to the beginning of the next Sabbath. And then the next course would come in. So twice a year, if you were of that family, maybe a little more than twice, you would come in and do your Sabbath duty. Now, who got to be in the Holy of Holies? The person who got to be over Yom Kippur, they would draw lots. And you see this happen in the first chapter of Luke. The father of John the Baptist drew the lot. He was the one that got to go in there. Probably the only time he'd ever been in there. Because by this time, I mean, you're lucky if you get to be the one chosen, as long as you don't die and they have to drag you out by the rope. That's a once in a lifetime experience because there's so many people available for it. As long as that 24 were, long as that group was there, they represented all the Levites. The group that represented the family of Aaron. Each week the group that was there represented the whole priestly clan. Well, here in heaven we have these 24 elders. They're sitting on thrones along with the guy in the center. And who are they? Well, as we look through other parts of the text, they can't be tribulation saints. We're going to see them in verses 7, 13, and 14 coming out of the tribulation. The tribulation hadn't started yet. In verse 7:11, the angels are standing there with the elders. So they're two separate groups, two separate people. And the nation of Israel, they're still on the earth. In fact, in chapter 7, that's the chapter, the 144,000. They're being select groups out of those families are being sealed to God. They're still on the earth. I see. Their characteristics. We're going back into the letters of the churches over the last several weeks. And if you're wondering, you see how it suddenly just changed the font size on me. Well, I test printed this because I did something and it printed fine on the test print, but now it's I can see it. Laodicea, chapter 3, verse 21. To him who overcomes, I will grant to sit with me on my throne. So the people who fix the problem in Laodicea will sit on thrones with the Messiah. 3:5, that's the church of Sardis. He who overcomes shall be clothed in white garments. These people are clothed in white. They are wearing crowns of gold. Smyrna, which was chapter 2, verse 10, be faithful unto death, and I will give you a crown of life. Also, the church of Philadelphia, 3:11, behold, I am coming quickly. Hold fast to what you have, that no one takes your crown. In the next chapter, which we will get to in a little bit, this group is singing a song saying, you have redeemed us and you are worthy. The angels weren't redeemed. Who was redeemed? Who did Jesus go to the cross for? Us. The crowns that they're wearing, and I don't know if anybody knows this, but in Greek there's two different words for a crown. There's a diadem and a Stephanos. A diadem is a headpiece it's a birthright crown. Think royalty, King James got his crown by being the son of a king, royalty. We're fixing to see Charles crowned. He is the son of Elizabeth. Is that who just died? His crown is his birthright. Stephanos is an earned crown. It comes from like the Olympic Games, a little wreath they would set on your head. It's a wreath or garland which is given as a prize to the victors in public games. Which crown are these people wearing in the previous verse? They're wearing Stephanos. They're not there by birthright. They're there because they earned it through Jesus who died on the cross. You know, shall get more into this. There are at least 5 crowns promised throughout the text. Probably more. But, you know, Jesus paid for your salvation. But that is not the finish line. You are supposed to work for a reward. You know, for those who suffer for his sake, they're promised the crown of life. For those who love and long for his appearing, they're promised a crown of righteousness. For those who feed the flock, a crown of glory. For those who press on steadfastly, continue, the crown incorruptible, 1 Corinthians 9. And for those who win souls, bring more people into the kingdom, the crown of rejoicing. And I am sure there are more, but I don't think the Bible lists more. But
And for the throne, and from the throne proceeding light, thunder, and voices. 7 lamps of fire were burning before the throne, which are the 7 spirits of God. Before the throne there was a sea of glass like crystal, and in the midst of the throne and around the throne were 4 living creatures, full of eyes in front and in back.
these 7 lamps, probably a reference to the 7-fold Spirit of God in Isaiah 11. It is also noted back in chapter 1 and through chapter 2 and 3, each church had a lampstand. That lampstand could represent the Spirit in the churches. If that's the case, here's all the Spirit back in heaven. Once again, you know, I'm not saying the Spirit's ever going to leave the earth, but in the way it indwells the church today will be different during the tribulation. Either way, the fact that you have the Father visioned on the throne, you have the whole Spirit there, you have angels, you have elders. What these events that are going on have the full attention of the Godhead. It's a big deal.
The first living creature was like a lion, the second living creature like a calf, and the third living creature was a face like a man. And,
Go ahead.
and the fourth living creature was like a flying eagle. The 4 living creatures each, having 6 wings, with full of eyes around and within, and they do not rest day or night, saying, Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come.
If you're reading King James, it calls these the 4 beasts. Beast, probably in today's vernacular, beast is not the best translation. Creatures isn't necessarily the best either. The Greek word is zoon, which we get zoo from, and it would probably be the 4 living ones. Beast would be in Greek is therion, which we'll see in chapter 13, referring to the beast. So these are 4 living creatures. They are probably the seraphim as seen in Isaiah 6, 2 through 3, and 6 through 7. Like in Isaiah, they are literally crying, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord. this is also, take take me in. Is that the song we sing? No, we'll get to that one too. But take a coal, touch my lips. Well, that's what's going on in Isaiah. He's calling, those the seraphim are around. The seraphim grabs a coal and touches it to Isaiah's lip to cleanse him in chapter 6 and proclaims, "Holy, holy, holy." You got 2 song references out of that.
You're talking about the last part of verse 8.
That is where that one comes from too.
Lord God Almighty was and
Is to come. Yeah.
Revelation song.
Yeah. You'll see where very much where they get the words for that song in these 2 chapters.
Whenever the living creatures give glory and honor and thanks to him who sits on the throne, who lives forever and ever. The 24 elders fall down before him who sat on the throne and worship him who lives forever and ever, and cast their crowns before the throne, saying, "You are worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power, for you created all things, and by your will they exist and will create and were created."
Here's another one of those points you can get into a rabbit hole. These seraphim, are they angels or are they something different? And there's all kind of arguments into whether they're the top level of angels or whether they're a separate entity from the angels. But they lead worship constantly. They're constantly proclaiming the holiness of God.
They're heavenly worship leaders.
Yes. Why do you think they say holy 3 times? Could that be a hint of the Trinity? When they do this, the elders cast their crowns before the throne and proclaim, "The Lord is worthy. For if not for the Father, the Son, and the Spirit, they would not be able to have crowns." God has opened up the way for us to earn a reward. Without his death on the cross, we would not ever be in this place. We would never see it. So the crowns are ours, but they're his, because without him, we have nothing. It is through the action of the redemption on the cross that opens the way for us to get crowns. That's chapter 4. Did I go too fast? I feel like in a way I am, because there's so much going on here, and it's like how do you describe it all,
And I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll written inside and on the back sealed with 7 seals. Then I saw a strong angel proclaim with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the scroll and to loosen its seal?" And no one in heaven or on the earth or under the earth was able to open the scrolls or to look at it. That's a verse.
In the King James, it will have the word book instead of scrolls, these are not mistranslations. But in the time of John, when you said book, they were thinking of the thing on the left. This is called a codex. These were just coming onto the world at the time of John. This was a brand new invention. Getting into the 100 to 200s, these became more common because it's quicker and easier to tote this than a scroll. But today we think of a codex as a book. But throughout the writing of The Bible, a book, meant what we would call a scroll. But just think about how much information is in your Bible. Just consider in the New Testament, the scroll of Romans would be 11.5 feet long.
Just imagine if you dropped that while riding a horse.
Well, imagine what the length of Isaiah was with the Ethiopian eunuch in Acts chapter 9. Yeah. Mark's 19 feet. The book of John is 23.5 feet. Matthew's 30 feet. Now hold up your Bible and just look at it and think of, do you see why the codex became more popular? I mean, you're talking about having 66 different scrolls. They would take up a room, a rather large area. You have to pick up and scroll through and find where you need to read, which you see Jesus doing this in Luke. And we can just flip the page.
Scroll was probably made out of different type of material.
The cheaper, I say cheaper, but most of them were made out of papyrus. The more expensive ones would be made out of animal skins. Vellum, I think, is the name. But a lot of your common ones were made out of papyrus. And the way you would lay the paper out, you would wind up having a smooth side and a rough side. The back side was hard to write on.
So you even lost the back half. You couldn't necessarily write on it. Which
You,
makes sense because we're gonna roll it up anyway.
yeah, you do see scrolls that are written on the back side. There's one in Jeremiah. I didn't put it in my notes. Generally, if it was wrote on the back side, it was the instructions for what was required to redeem or open the scroll. Like a title deed, a will, any kind of legal document, if it was wrote on the back. And this scroll is wrote on the back side. If I go back, this program ain't letting me go back, but if I go back to the other verse, you'll see it's wrote on the outside and the inside. So this is some kind of deed here, or this is a legal scroll in that day.
Well, we must, because no one was found worthy to open and read the scroll or to look at it.
They searched above the earth, in the earth, and under the earth. John understands what's going on here. The Greek says he wept convulsively. No man was worthy to take. Because of Adam's sin, we all have lost our right to that. That is literally like the title deed to the earth. It belonged to Adam. Adam lost it.
Kind of like, I'm seeing a parallel, kind of like to when you truly realize how much you are in sin as you come to Christ for salvation for your own personal law. There is a part where you just weep and break because you know how lost you are.
Yeah. Well, John here is seeing, in essence, how lost the whole mankind is. But there's hope.
Amen.
In the Old Testament, there is the concept of the Goel. And this is going to be cliff notes so that I could spend another 2 hours on this. I would love to do the book of Ruth. This is going to be the cliff note version, sadly. But the Goel, or the kinsman redeemer, and it's laid out in Leviticus, but the note did not. I think it's Leviticus 25. In the Old Testament, there is what's known as the Goel. If you got into a situation where you lost your land due to debt, or you were enslaved or sold yourself into slavery because of the debt you had, one of your nearest kinsmen could come along and pay off your debt and gain you back your freedom. This job also included if a man died without heir, the nearest kinsman or relative had the option of raising up a heir for the dead man, dead kinsman. The best place you see this play out is the book of Ruth. You know, the Goel, he had to be a kinsman. He has to be a near relative. He has to be able to perform. He has to be willing. It's his choice. You know, if you remember in Ruth, Boaz seeks out the guy that's closer to him and he chooses not to. And somewhere in the Bible, I don't have it in my notes. If we ever do Ruth, I'll have it. But that was the job that Ruth should have done. And if the kinsman refused, she could spit on him. She took his shoe, and she shamed him for not doing. And then he had to walk around for a certain amount of time missing a shoe, letting the whole the town know that he was positioned and he refused to stand in for his kinsman. If he decides to, he has to assume all the obligations of the beneficiary. So, like I said, if it's land, if the money's owed, he has to pay it to redeem the land. If it's a child, he has to help raise the child. You know. The best example, Boaz. He's a kinsman to Naomi. He was wealthy. He was able. He was willing to marry Ruth, and he made sure Ruth and Naomi were both taken care of. In chapter 1 of Ruth, Naomi and family sell their land and leave due to famine. It does not work out well. Naomi's husband and her sons die in a foreign land. Now, by this time, they've married 2 Moabites. At the end of chapter 1, she decides to return to her homeland, and Ruth goes with her. Orpah goes back to her people. In chapter 2, we're introduced to Boaz. Naomi went back as a widow. She had a right to go glean the fields. In Jewish law, you were allowed to go through your fields one time and pick the fruit. Anything that was left after that one time was left for widows, orphans, destitutes. If it dropped on the ground, you could not pick it up. Move on. It was so once they went through their fields, anybody in the community who was widowed or orphan could come and gather food for them for what was left. Well, Ruth winds up in the field of Boaz. He asks her, he notices her, he's heard of her. He instructs his men to just kind of drop a little extra over there where she's at. He starts taking care of her. He asks her not to go into other fields because, you know, some of these fields, these women, that they might have no right, they'd be taken advantage of. By chapter 3, Naomi recognizes there's an opportunity here. Naomi knows the law. Ruth is a Gentile. She tells Ruth what to do and how to go about asking Boaz to step in. Ruth no matter how much Boaz wants to, it's Ruth's move. Ruth, yeah. Naomi is explaining the rules so Ruth can do that. Think of Naomi as the Old Testament, Ruth as the Gentile New Testament. And like I said earlier, the job that you see Boaz doing in chapter 4 would normally be Ruth or Naomi doing. But by chapter 4, Boaz seeks out the other kinsman that can make a claim on Naomi's land and settles that with him. He announces that he is going to redeem the land for Naomi and will take Ruth as his bride. Ruth becomes the grandmother or great-grandmother of David and is in the Messianic line. So now back to John. We have a problem. We need a redeemer. We need a Boaz. Who you think our Boaz is?
One of the elders said to me, "Do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah and the root of David has triumphed. He is able to open the scrolls, and it is seven sealed."
If you get in the book of Luke, I think it's around chapter 17, Jesus makes reference to he has a trial of fire he has to go through. Well, he is the other end of this trial. He is a near kinsman. You know, he took on flesh. He dwelt with us. He is God in flesh form, Emmanuel, God dwelling with us. He is our near kinsman. He is able. He is willing, and he is assuming all the obligations. We've also got a shift here because now we're the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David. Those are Old Testament references to the Messiah. The Messiah would descend from Judah. He would be a branch off of David. He is able to open the scroll.
And I looked, and behold, in the midst of the throne and of the four living creatures, and in the midst of the elders stood a lamb, as though it had been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent into all the earth. Then he came and took the scroll out of the right hand of him who sat on the throne.
So who's taken the scroll? Who's taken possession again? Jesus. John sees him as a lamb who was slain, but has 7 eyes. It's literally seeing the spirits of God are there in that lamb, and that lamb, think Passover lamb. Because of the Passover lamb, the death angel passed over all of the children of Israel. If you didn't, and it didn't matter if you were a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or if you were an Egyptian, if you had the blood on the post, you were covered. If you didn't have the blood on the post, the firstborn died. The lamb speaks of his first coming. The lion speaks of the second coming. The Jews are looking for the Lion of the tribe of Judah. They miss the lamb. Yeshua HaMashiach. It's Hebrew for Jesus is Messiah. You know, the lion, Genesis 49:8, that's where Jacob is praying and prophesying over his sons. Hosea 5:14 and Hebrews 7:4, they all refer to the lion coming. Root of David. There is promise that a root of David will come and rule the whole world. You know, Jesus, Matthew 22:41 through 46, if you ever paid attention, he's arguing with the Pharisees, and you know, they wanting to question him, so he throws them a question. If the Messiah is a descendant of David, then why does David call him Lord? And he's referring to a certain psalm. I think it's 100. I don't know, I have to look it up. But he stumps them, the paradox. Jesus is the descendant of David, yet he is the one who brung David and his line into existence. He uses that paradox to baffle the Pharisees.
Almost like it. You think you're so smart.
Exactly. I think it says, and I have to look, I think it says, and they didn't ask him any more questions after that.
That's when they were trying to trick him up so they could arrest him, right?
Yeah.
Now, when he had taken the scroll, and the four living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each having a harp and golden bowl full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. And they sang a new song, saying, You are worthy to take the scroll and open its seal, for you were slain and have redeemed us to God by your blood out of every tribe and tongue and people and nation, and have made us kings and priests to our God, and we shall reign on the earth.
I want you to notice that, okay, the previous chapter I referred to who the 24 elders were. This is the song they're singing. These people are people out of all the world who have been redeemed by the Lamb. And he's going to make us kings and priests, and we shall reign with him on earth. Some heavy promises. You notice the 24 elders have to be in heaven before Jesus receives this scroll or book. They celebrate when he receives the book. Once he starts opening that book, the time of tribulation starts. It can't start till he receives the book. He can't receive the book until we're up there. Once it starts, God starts pouring his wrath out on the earth.
Then I looked, and I heard the voice of many angels around the throne, and living creatures, and the elders, and the numbers of them were 10,000 times 10,000, and thousands of thousands, saying with a loud voice, Worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power and riches and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and blessing. And every creature which is in heaven and on the earth and under the earth, and such as are in the sea, and all that are in them, I heard saying, Blessing and honor and glory and power be to him who sits on the throne and the Lamb forever and ever. Then the four living creatures said, Amen, and the 24 elders fell down and worshiped him who lives forever and ever.
Do you notice in chapter 4 they were worshiping the man on the throne or the Father? They're worshiping the Lamb now. This is one of these verses for your JW friend there. You know, everybody in heaven is falling at the Lamb. You are worthy. You are worthy. Even the angels are worshiping him. You know, the Jehovah's Witnesses say Jesus is the Archangel Michael. No. They know verses out of the Bible. They don't know the Bible. Everyone in heaven is worshiping the Lamb as he receives the book. This is a big thing. This is the start of the fulfillment of things all the way back to Genesis.
But it says there in the Bible too, there's going to be a time when all will confess his name and kneel.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point in time, everything, what they're reading there, everything, the animals, the people, everybody's kneeling.
Mm-hmm. This places the worship of Jesus on the same level as the worship of God. All heaven is on its face before the Father and the Son. Say Revelations is a heavy book. But that is the end of 2 chapters. So I leave you with these 2 thoughts. Are you working towards a crown? You know, as long as you're on this earth, you have a chance to improve your report card or scorecard. You know, are you longing for his return? Are you reaching out to, spreading the gospel? Or the other is, are you ready to be in that procession proclaiming the Lamb to be worthy. Because the picture I see, that's us. The 24 representing all the church from the time of Christ to the time of the rapture.
Some hard questions you posed up there, Homer.
Well, starting with the next chapter, the fireworks start. The next verse, the seals start opening, and we have the introduction of the pseudo Messiah,